Presentation, Tuesday, May 14th. I would like to, first item on the agenda would be the approval. Yes, Jim.
I'd like to move the approval of the agenda with an addition of the HR addendum to item 6C on the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded? Yes.
I'd like to add something to business, and that is for updated data to be, updated data to be offered up to, or talked about on projections. That's the word I'm looking for.
So you be requesting or presenting?
I'm requesting it be added to business.
Point of order.
Yes.
I believe that has to go to governance first.
I believe our policy allows us to also ask at the time of meeting. We did it last meeting as well.
I know, I think it was a policy violation last meeting.
I think as long as the board deems that it is acceptable by vote, we can do so.
That would be correct.
So can we vote on the addition of adding this under our business item?
Okay. Jennifer has asked that we add item E, updated, what did you call it?
Data projections?
Updated data projections. It would be D under 7. And are you bringing that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
And is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Yes, Jim?
No.
Okay, with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So now we have the motion and a second on the table for the approval of the agenda, including the addendum of the HR being added to 6C. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Up next, we'd like Missy Eidness to introduce our continuous improvement and accountability monitoring.
Yes, each year we do an internal review process with selected buildings before we, every 5 years, do a external review of the entire district. And tonight, Sean Safransky will present with his team on the buildings that went through the internal process tonight.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Safransky. I serve as an assistant principal at Davies High School. And in one of my roles, along with my principal duties, are I serve as a chairperson for our district school improvement committee. And with our presentation tonight, just to give a little background, you'll hear the word Advanced Ed, and Advanced Ed is the accrediting agency for all North Dakota schools. DPI uses Advanced Ed as a tool for meeting its ESSA requirements. So DPI has worked pretty closely with Advanced Ed and making schools have models so that they can help meet that accreditation standard. Each school goes through an accreditation cycle, and it's every 5 years. And so if you'll see up on the board there, in 2020, 2021, Advanced Ed will put together a team that may be 6, 7, 8 individuals from probably around the country that will be here, and they will spend probably 3 days in as many school buildings as possible, interviewing stakeholders, teachers, parents, you name it. And then in the end, they will be presenting us with a report, recommendations, findings, and then hopefully eventually helping us meet that accredited status again for another 5-year period. What we're going to kind of present today is we have what's called an internal review process. And each year we have about 5 Fargo Public Schools, and those schools will go through an internal review that very much mirrors the process that Advanced Ed uses. We will put together a team of maybe 5, 6 professionals. They could be principals, teachers, strategists from different buildings. And what they will do is they'll come in for maybe a day, day and a half, visit with teachers, students, look at data, talk with people about what type of school improvement initiatives they have. They'll try to collect some data, and in the end, they present a report to that building on some of those findings, on maybe what are some of those highlights, those real powerful practices that are like, wow, this is really going well in your school, that hopefully helps affirm those teachers, administrators, people that are working hard to generate change for the better in their school, and hopefully give them a little pat on the back. And as well, it's to try and dig down a little bit and see what are some of those areas that, you know what, if maybe we put some efforts into trying to strengthen an area of weakness, we could get a real big bang for our buck, or get you know, some of that low-hanging fruit where maybe a few suggestions on how we can make our schools better. So that's kind of what that process looks like. Today we have 5 different administrators here. They're going to each speak for about 20-25 minutes on their school. No, 3, I've told them all 3 to 4, so hopefully they'll be real quick. So thank you all very much for your time, and I think Cheryl, you are up first.
I'm Cheryl Jansen. I'm the principal at McKinley Elementary in North Fargo. So this is us. We have our Wildcat Way. We are respectful, responsible. We are safe. We are McKinley. And we hosted a intern review on April 2nd and 3rd. So some of the information about McKinley: we have 185 students K-5, 338 full-time staff members that's certified in support. We are a school-wide Title I school. We have 54% free and reduced, 11 classrooms with an average teacher experience of 15 years. So what makes us unique? Every school does have its own footprint, and ours is a strong MTSSA and MTSSB program. So that's academic and behavior programs, interventions for kids, so we can support them meeting our goals. And it's led by classroom teachers, not a team, but but individual classroom teachers. We have data-driven PLC work each and every week as well. Some of the challenges for McKinley: we have an increase in mobility of our enrollment that has changed over time. Also an increase in social and emotional needs of our students, as well as our students' lagging skills in the area of perseverance. So in our review, the team comes in and they do powerful practices as well as areas for growth. So these are our powerful practices that they found in their interviews and the work with paperwork and their visits among the classrooms. So McKinley has a process that addresses the needs of learners by tracking student data to guide their instruction, along with utilizing the internal and external resources effectively. That's the area. So we track behavior and academic data. It's collected and tracked, and then we also do a lot of professional development based on that academic data and action plans as well. And the leadership team really works hard to make that PLC time meaningful and driven by teachers, so that they have ownership in it, and because they are in those trenches every day. Also, small group instruction has been our focus in math and in reading, and it is very impactful. Jan Richardson is where we're working in our small group reading, and we are also using AVMR with our small group math. Teachers also use multiple different tools in monitoring the students' progress in these small group settings. The third powerful practice is McKinley has a positive environment. The staff is dedicated and student-minded, with also knowing who the students are. That is one of our unique things, because we are a very small school, that we do know all of the students. And when walking down the hall, the review team was greeted by almost every student or staff member. We are also working on through a Lost at School book study after we did our trauma training at the end of last year into this year. We also have attendance trophies that go from classroom to classroom, and we have a very strong Adopt a School partner that's very involved in our school on a weekly basis with Heat Transfer Warehouse. And our opportunities for improvement, which we're always looking for that piece, and that is when you look at advanced ed, we are looking for how can we get better, how can we help our students and our staff get better. One of those is that they indicated was active engagement and collaboration in the classroom. So what we're going to be looking at is that 21st century skills and really trying to work hard to build those into the classroom lessons. Our second one is developing a growth mindset that aligns to the perseverance piece that we're wanting to work with our students on. Not, you did a great job. It's, you worked hard. You tried many strategies. We want to be changing that to a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. Also, decrease the inconsistencies between adults and student interviews and surveys. It was a lot of inconsistencies in regards to the relationships that the adults and the kids see and how positive it is and not. So we want to make sure that we're working with the SOS or Save One Student program and increase that so we impact more students. That would be a program where one adult is attached to that student. The student may or may not know that, but that adult is checking in with that student every week just to check in really on a lighthearted type of a note. So that's McKinley. Who's next? Jefferson.
Good evening, I'm Brad Franklin, principal at Jefferson. We had our review on January 8th and 9th. You can see our Bobcat saying our expectations. Each day we start our day with student announcements, and we have students that recite this. We recite it right after the pledge, and we do it as a school, so be respectful, on task and focused. Body and objects are safe. Care for self and others. Always follow directions the first time given. Treat others the way you want to be treated, and speak positive words. Jefferson information demographics. Currently, we're at 323 students. This is down a little bit the last few years, and I think if you look at the demographer, the next projected 5 years will be around 325, 330, so that is a change for us. We have 65 staff members, certified and support. We're a school-wide Title I building, and our current free and reduced is 76%, and that's been pretty steady, or the last few years around that 75%. We have 18 sections with an average teacher experience of 13 years. What makes us unique is our MTSS and MTSSB process, and probably more our MTSSB process. Really, we were one of the first schools to have a behavior interventionist at Jefferson, so we really were kind of at the forefront of trying to mold this process. So what does the MTSSB process look like to pattern after our academic process? So we have some flow charts, and we work with a lot of different avenues to support our students. PLCs, this has been a focus, really using student data, student work to improve inform our instruction and also improve our instruction. That's an ongoing goal. I think we have a lot of data available to us, but our goal is to really look at that student data. And then currently this November, we have a grant, we're a demonstration site at the state level for a full-service community school, and in the grants through PATH, so really working with them to support the needs of our families and students at Jefferson. Jefferson challenges, one is early education. A lot of our students come to us not engaged in any prior type of education, early education, so they're at times behind as they enter kindergarten, so trying to then meet their needs. Also, student engagement in extracurricular activities. A lot of our students aren't involved in community-wide activities, so trying to then find opportunities for them to participate, whether it's in our neighborhood or just trying to meet, work with other outside organizations. And then the ongoing social emotional needs of our students and families, trying to partner with them and support them so their family and also their students can be successful within our community. Our powerful practices, first, we have a school-wide approach, and I think that is a really strength. We're really collaborative with our staff at Jefferson. We kind of share students across classrooms when we have our reading literacy block and our math block. We have title teachers push into classrooms to minimize our transitions. That's one strong attribute of Jefferson, and also just the multiple programs that we have within our building, and I think also partnering with other agencies that come into our building. I think that's a strength that helps us meet the diverse needs of our learners. Also, high expectations for student learning. One of our goals across the district is making sure we have a learning objective to really narrow our instruction and our focus for our lesson. So identifying the learning goals, expectations, we display those through anchor charts. We also then communicate that verbally to the students prior to the lesson and also at the end of the lesson. And then school-wide behavior expectations are shared and discussed daily. So we've had a PBJ committee, a PBIS form that really works hard to make sure that we have morning meeting every day for 20 minutes. And really, we have some curriculum that we've created prior to implementing the SEL curriculum at the district level. So we've worked hard to really establish that at the beginning of the day to support our grade levels and our students. And then the effort to communicate and bring parents in. That's a challenge for us, but we are recognized for our effort. We provide a lot of variety of events for our parents to come into the school setting. A lot of our parents maybe didn't have a great experience in school, so we want to make sure that they feel welcome and we can have that partnership with them. So giving surveys, anytime we have a parent involvement event, we have surveys that we try to, rather than sending it out through a link, we try to have them, we have computers available. So we just try to be really resourceful with the time we have with them to get their feedback. Opportunities for improvement. First is 21st century skills used throughout the school. So we're probably in our 5th year of a one-on-one Chromebook grant in our 4th and 5th grade level. Also, we've really transformed our computer lab at our media specialist into a STEAM lab. So we're seeing that, you know, and we're in the early phases of this, but that's a goal of ours, how we can then implement that more into the classroom setting. And also that digital learning, how can we use it more consistently and in different ways? And one goal for us coming up for the next year is that word of creation. How can we have students kind of use digital technology for creation? And then progress monitoring. We progress monitor, we track student data. We use that to inform our instruction, form our literacy groups and math groups. But one area to improve is to really have the student involved in that, for them identifying their growth and how well they're doing, and maybe kind of next steps in their learning. So get them involved in that progress monitoring and goal setting process. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Shane Martin, principal at Ben Franklin Middle School. We hosted an internal review in December. At Ben Franklin Middle School, we coach our students, encourage our students to add value every day through respectful, responsible behavior. We ask our students to add value not only in their school, but in their community. It's an everyday message that we send to our kids. Let's see if we're still on Ben. Yes, good. So a little more about Ben. We currently have 822 students. We're grades 6 through 8, of course. We have about 120 full-time staff, certified and support. 32% of our kids qualify for free and reduced. We have 7 core teaching teams, so 3 6th grade teaching teams, 2 7th and 2 8th grade core teaching teams. A total of 32 sections. Our average teacher experience is 18 years. It seems that we have people at the extremes, though, at this point at Ben Franklin. What makes us unique is we have a new administration. I'm a longtime assistant principal at Ben, but for the first time in 30-some years, John Nelson is no longer in the building. He was a teacher there 35 years ago, right? And so we have a new administration. With that, we've had some new change to staff. We have some we're growing in our student population. And with any change to new administration, even minor change, we're looking at refining our direction a little bit. Ben Franklin challenges increasing student numbers, and we see that the students coming to us have higher needs. One thing about student numbers, 822 today, but I think as recently as 6 years ago, we had just below 700 students at Ben. So we're a growing school. Mission and vision, I want to talk a little bit about values on the bottom there. We reinforce relationship, respect, responsibility, relevance, and rigor. The 5 R's are our values. They're what we stand for. And we have done a crosswalk with the Marzano teacher evaluation system to make sure that our teachers can set goals in one of those 5 areas of value that also align with Marzano. Opportunities for improvement that the team found when they visited us in December. One was consistency and accountability across all content areas, so both vertically and horizontally. The team encouraged us to further analyze data and make sure it's systematically looked at, especially for our real struggling learners. Our kids who are struggling the most are our special education students, our lower SES students, and our minority learners. The team also encouraged us to further discuss within teams and PLCs. And they pointed out that we need to continue to do our fall data drill and share our information with stakeholders and faculty. That data drill, we bring to our staff big picture data from national assessments, state assessments, measure of academic progress, et cetera. We bring big picture numbers to our staff, and then we drill down so that our teachers can see what that actually looks like within their individual classrooms. And powerful practices at Ben. The team recognized that our students feel cared for, loved, and safe. One of our kids said, and the team quoted this, that the kids would rather be at school than at home. Our school improvement plan does show that staff are working hard to create a safe and caring environment. That's one of our goals, our school improvement goals. The team recognized that there's multi-way communication between students, teachers, and families regarding the learning process. Some of the examples they gave or listed were student rubrics, teen tune-ups, Google Classroom, use of daily planner, and a number of other ways that we use to communicate with parents. And then finally, and I alluded to this when I said we're looking at refining our direction, the team recognized that there is progress towards a clear vision for the learning culture and implementation of consistent practices that support that vision. And the examples were the character pillars and our above the line, below the line discipline policy. And I'll finish with what I started with, again, every day to reinforce that we ask our kids to add value by simply being respectful and responsible. That's the way that they improve their school and improve our community. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jason Cressup, the principal at Lewis and Clark Elementary. And located at the bottom is our pledge statement that we say daily. We will do our best to be our best. We will be respectful, responsible, safe, and good citizens. Our internal review was held February 4th and 5th of this year. A little bit about Lewis and Clark. Average enrollment is about 500. We're down a little bit. We've lost a few students recently, but roughly in that range. Again, we are a Title I school-wide building, 46% free and reduced. We have 45 certified staff and 34 support staff. That includes custodial, paras, lunch and recess supervisors, and kitchen staff. What makes Lewis and Clark unique is certainly our Envoy. This year we had 17 certified staff, which is the most we've ever had in 1 year, and the first 3 demonstration level teachers in the state of North Dakota. So we're very proud of that, and that just simply means that they can have others come in and observe and learn from them, which we've been doing this year within our own district from other schools. So that's been very positive. We're also a math-focused school, focusing on AVMR strategies, and again, we've seen some really great gains as being that math-focused school. And a couple of other fun things. We have a community school garden that was incredibly successful this past year, run by some teachers. And I'm going to go on a limb and say we're the only school that has an escape room. Last summer, we ran a camp where the kids created an escape room, and just today we had some 4th graders going through it. So it's a great 21st century skill building project that we had. Some of our challenges, our biggest, is just the ever-changing and increasing numbers of unique student needs. Our goals this year, we want all students to make 1 year's growth in reading, 1 year's growth in math. All students and staff will learn and work in a safe environment, and we want to stress and provide all parents or guardians opportunities to participate, volunteer, and actively engage in their child's education. Some of our opportunities from growth that we learned from the review were that we want to try to include even more staff in the UDP and data analysis process. And above that was I put the indicators from Advanced Ed that they use as kind of an outline. Also, some opportunities for growth is just creating even more opportunities for differentiated learning. And finally, analyzing current data at very, very deep levels. Getting into the demographics of the data. You can drown in data, and sometimes you don't have enough, and so it's finding that balance of what to look at. Some of the powerful practices that were observed, staff are dedicated and united in working through challenges unique to the school. Also, that we have a formal structure of coaches and with scheduling in place to support two main initiatives in Envoy and AVMR, and that's something that is a strong belief in my own personal professional development, is that we need coaches and we need people in watching our teachers and providing feedback. And the structure that we have in place in both Envoy and AVMR has been well received by teachers, and I feel like when they leave those coaching conversations, they feel like they've gotten better, and so it's been incredibly powerful. Another powerful practice is students feel that there's at least one person in the building who cares about them and who they could trust. And they believe that their teachers want them to be successful. We too have a Save One Student program that we survey students each year to find out if they feel cared for or if that somebody in the building trusts them, and so we have them write down a name, and each year we've decreased the number of students that answered no, they don't, and so we attach people to them. We use our business partners, Sundog, to come in and volunteer and really take any volunteers to help connect with adults in our building.
Good evening, I'm Greta Evenson, one of the assistant principals at South High, and we had our external or engagement review in February, so February 12th and 13th. I've just listed here our two SIP goals, and I should say I'm one of the co-chairs of the SIP committee, and we have great representation on our committee. We have about 10 to 15 now next year, teachers and staff who will serve on that committee. But our first academic goal is all students will graduate, and this is, I believe, our 4th year with that academic goal. And I'm sorry that the visual up there is small for the cultural goal, but that is ensuring and fostering positive collaborative relationships amongst students and staff. And you can just see there that we have a lot of strategies that we are implementing at South High to ensure that. Just a quick look at our demographics. This year, our student count is 920, and that is down from previous years where we've been kind of relatively around 1,000 students. Free and reduced, 34%, EL 11, IEP 12.7%, and then there's the ethnic representation there. And again, sorry, it's kind of small. I'll just start with the powerful practices that the engagement review provided to us. They gathered from, again, it was classroom visits, it was student interviews, and it was teacher and staff interviews as well, where they came up with these powerful practices. But they indicated positive relationships between students and staff, as well as student to student. From a student interview, when they were asked to describe the best thing about South High School, many of them said our teachers. And then students were quick to heap praise on the manner in which many teachers are dedicated to helping students. The second powerful practice was student diversity and school culture are things that students and staff embrace. Again, interviews with teachers provided immediate evidence on the belief that staff embraces the diversity of its student population and believe wholeheartedly it's something that makes South High a great school. The same thing from student interviews. It was echoed there that students indicated the school's diversity was something that they were proud of and that it just makes South High stronger. And then many classroom observations. The engagement review team noticed student groupings were working collaboratively and cooperatively together. And then the last powerful practice that they indicated was well-managed and positive learning environments throughout. So numerous classrooms contained student collaboration where it was positive, and they helped enhance the learning experience for students. And the team believe that the staff at South High School is working aggressively to foster a culture that supports a positive classroom learning environment for all. Like I said back on one of my previous slides, it contained many strategies that we are doing. For example, this was our second year where we incorporated a staff book study. Lost at School was 2 years ago, and this year we did growth mindset. So that was something that we've done as a whole school to help foster that environment. And then finally, opportunities for improvement. SSR, sustained silent reading, is a practice that we have had at South High for many years. And one thing that the team indicated was inconsistencies in the manner in which it's implemented. We do typically run SSR on Wednesdays at the first 10 to 15 minutes in a classroom. Some may do it at the end of class, but they just asked or provided feedback on maybe aligning and gathering some data and being more consistent. So I'm happy to say that with our team, when we meet at camp on June 4th, SSR is one of our topics that we'll talk about. We're giving an exit survey to our staff on the 30th of May to get some more feedback on that. The second opportunity is minute meetings. This was our first year that we ran minute meetings at South High School, where teachers check in with students individually, and that's something that we just kind of did a soft implementation of it, I guess, this year. But they said to further increase the number of positive relationships with adults at South High School, they liked it, but just to continue to grow in that minute meeting mindset. And then the last one was district initiatives involving the UDP process and ELOs, making that a greater focus during PLCs. So those were the three opportunities for improvement at South. Thank you.
All I wanted to do is just thank the board for giving us the opportunity to take 20-some minutes of everyone's time. It really lets us all know the value that you as a board, Dr. Gandhi, put in our school improvement process. I think the things that we put in place here, you will not see schools run an internal review process like this, or at least I have never seen, and I've been on dozens of different reviews around the state, big and small school. And I think when we really talk about how do we build a consistency, a growth mindset, kind of a self-accountability, because when we go into each other's buildings, there's a little bit of pat on the back and what are you doing well, and there's a little bit of like how do we kind of hold our colleagues accountable for, how can they continue to grow as well. So we really appreciate you giving us this platform to come and speak here today. And before I go, I just want to make sure I thank principals. We have a tremendous team of peoples within each building and throughout the district that really serve on all our school improvement teams that really kind of help make this group work and help provide valuable feedback to all our schools. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Sean. And at this time, is there any questions for any of the presenters? Robin?
I have two questions and maybe some points to be made. So I've heard great things about the Envoy program. Is this primarily conducted at the elementary level? And if so, how many schools participate in the Envoy model? Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Should have never said anything. No, I'm just kidding. I'm very proud of it, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. Envoy's currently primarily in the elementaries, I believe. I will say from my experience as 25 years, when I first took that training, they had me at hello. It's just been the most powerful practice and professional development that I've had. And again, I mentioned in my little review there that the coaching model, when teachers feel supported, and by supported I mean given feedback in how they can improve, and when they walk away from something, knowing that they've gotten better, and building that teacher efficacy, it's really been the model that this Midwest Educational Consultants is really powerful. And we started 3 years ago, where we had one or two people certified, and the ball has just continued to roll. And like I said, now 17 certified and 3 demonstration teachers. And it really just gives you kind of a standard and they always say too is, they always tell me, remind your teachers that certification is step one. and then you continue with that coaching. So, yeah, I believe right now it's Lincoln and Washington, a few other elementary schools are getting the ball rolling.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but part of that process is the teacher has an earbud in, and there's a coach in the classroom coaching them to get through different
That is a
delivery
different
modes.
approach, that's TCIT. However,
sorry.
I watched and went to some training on that too, and so I've joined the two actually.
Okay.
We do have that ability. What it looks like is, and I'm a certified coach, so I can go in and coach teachers, is that I go in and I watch a session and I am drawing pictures and labeling in what I see. And following that 15-minute observation, they come back, they get their kids on some independent work, and then we have a conversation where I just show them each of the things, using, again, the visual supports along with my verbal, and really I try to just commend them on what they are doing, and then I offer suggestions, because my conversation ends with, of those things that I complimented you on and the suggestions, what stands out most to you? And so then they take that, so it's their decision on what they want to work on, and it's not you need to do this or you need to do that, but it's really them with some self-reflection. So that's how the Envoy works, but we have kind of started to dabble in that earpiece too, yeah.
One follow-up, so in my full-time job, this is very important, and I don't want this to be trivialized because this is so important to student success, but students feel there is at least one person in the building who cares about them and who they can trust. That is a national key indicator, and I use that in my career, and I cannot stress how important that is for our kids, because that talks about SELs, that talks about student behavior, that talks about security and safety, and when kids feel safe in school, that is so important. And one thing the board can continue to support at all levels are smaller class sizes and smaller schools, because that allows those relationships to be built. And so I just wanted to underscore how important that is. It sounds trivial when we hear it, but it's a huge KPI.
It's not, everybody needs that one person
Yep.
that they can trust and go to. And so at our school, and I know other schools around the district, they value that as much as anybody, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Question, sorry. Yes. Sorry.
That's
Is
okay.
Envoy
Yeah.
currently offered also at the middle school?
It's kind of each building. I've had to choose to use the funds I have in that manner, and there's expense to it. So each school is they make their own choices on what kind of classroom management they want to go through. So yeah. The training is open. Thank you, Cheryl. The training, there is district-wide training. We have a team of trainers here in Fargo Public Schools that there's one every summer, and then I think one offered during the school year as well. The piece with that is, again, if you just do the training, that's good. That's a good step. But I think the follow-up coaching is what keeps the ball rolling, and that's really the critical key. And I ask any new staff in my building, I ask them to attend that training, because we've decided as a school that's something that we value. So.
Thank you. Dave?
I have a question for Sean. Sean, does the same internal team do all of these visits?
No, so what we will do is, we'll kind of find a chairperson, and that will usually be a member from there's a FPS committee of like 18 or 20 people, and we meet once a month, and one of those people will chair, and then it'll be their job to find maybe another 3, 4, 5 people. And then each year, we'll get a chance to go to one of those buildings. So the nice part about that is it's always a little bit different in that you get to see an elementary school, middle school, high school. So there's always a nice flavor as far as that goes. And it kind of spreads the wealth, so it's not the same people going to the same reviews. Each, during our monthly meeting, we will kind of reconvene, and whoever that chairperson was, they'll kind of give some share outs, talk about maybe what went well, were there some things with the review that they did differently, and then that just hopefully helps our process so that next year when we kind of set up our reviews again. So I think just the other Monday we set up for who are the 5 schools next year and who's going to chair them and how do we start finding volunteers to do that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay. At this time, I'm going to turn the gavel over to President Knutson.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you for your presentation also earlier. Sorry that I had some scheduling conflicts that arose, but very, very informative information for us with this previous presentation that also I feel ties into our discussions about safety and security and culture and climate within our school buildings. So as we have our discussions that move forward, I hope that we're all able to keep this information in mind and be secure in that more of this work will be going on in the future within the district, and whatever we can do as a board to help support the initiatives, please let us know. On to item number 4, recognition of the audience, and we do have some members that have signed up to speak with us this evening. So thank you for doing that. And I will, let's see, we have, I think, 10 people that have signed up to speak, so I'll call your name in order. And before we get started, just reading this, the little instructions that we try to go by. Mainly trying to stick to a certain number of minutes, and that can be hard with presentations, and we're all interested in what you have to say, but we'll, if we have to cut you off, or if I have to, sorry about that, but we'll try to stick to about four minutes each for each presentation. But at this evening, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and address for the record. We would also ask that speakers refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee by name. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond or debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. And again, we'll plan for a maximum of 4 minutes this evening. I'll gladly look for help in keeping track of the time if I'm not doing that effectively. So, okay. And if I mispronounce a name, I apologize ahead of time. Brian is our first speaker. Brian, Toay?
Pronounced Toy.
Toy. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Brian.
And if I may, I actually have a handout that I'd like to
Sure.
hand out that may assist. Thanks. And I live at 4233 Ashton Court South in Fargo. I have 2 children who attend Fargo Public Schools. I have a 3rd grader at Kennedy and a 6th grader at Discovery. I'm here today because I'm concerned with the time and resources that are put in by the task force, the Boundary Building Use Task Force, because I think they've been provided incomplete and inaccurate information, and they're using this incomplete and inaccurate information to make a very important decision. I've emailed each of you individually and provided a lot of this data already, but it's clear to me that the RSP reports that this school board has been relying on for at least the last 5 years are not accurate. None of the last 5 years have been anywhere near close to what the actual enrollment figures are. And the first page of the graph that I gave you shows this. It looks like a dorsal fin from a fish, with the red line being actual enrollment being the back of that fish. And every year's enrollment overshoots it. If you look at the 2014 report, it overshot 2018 enrollment by 623 students. 2017-18 report, just from last year, overprojected this year's enrollment by 213 students. And at the very first meeting for the task force, what do? They provide RSP data to this task force and say, look, we need to change the boundaries because enrollment is going to grow. Well, when you look at the actual enrollment, I think that was concerning to me. It's concerning that they used RSP because despite paying $17,000 a year for these reports, they're not accurate. And it's disturbing to me that they then claim, RSP claims, and the administration let them claim that their projections are 99.5% accurate. I mean, when you look at this graph, that statement is not true. They are not an accurate projection. And then at the end of, I believe, the first or second task force meeting, there was a comment from administration that they are concerned that they may be over or underestimating growth, that they think that growth might be even more than what RSP is projecting, despite 5 solid years of RSP overestimating growth. And when you look at RSP's data, they have a lot of information. These are 25, 30-page reports that they put together. But one thing that they do is they consistently say that we're expecting rapid growth, strong growth. They keep using those terms, that growth is going to grow in Fargo. Well, look at page 2. Page 2 is the building permits that were issued by the city of Fargo. There has been a steady decline in the number of building permits that have been issued within the city of Fargo over the past 4 years. And that's just the data that I could get. I couldn't get back more than that. I certainly would like to. But just in the last 4 years, building permit numbers have gone down 40% within the city of Fargo. And remember, city of Fargo includes Deer Creek and Rocking Horse, areas with very strong development that do not attend Fargo Public Schools. This year, as of April 30th, only 37 new home building permits have been issued in the city of Fargo. So RSP continues to tell us that there's this rapid growth in the city of Fargo, and it's simply not true. I think that this information needs to be shared with the task force. I think that the task force needs to be told that, hey, just so you know, that information we provided you by RSP has been inaccurate consistently for 5 straight years.
Thank you, Brian, for your time. We are going to move on to Rebecca Meidinger.
Hi there. Thank you for inviting us to share. My name is Rebecca Meidinger. I live at 5037 Woodhaven Drive, South. I have 4 kids that go to Fargo Public, 3 at Kennedy, and 1 at Discovery. And I want to thank you for the initiative that you guys have taken with the Safe Routes to School. I had the opportunity last week to walk through all of Woodhaven for about 2 hours last Tuesday morning with the Safe Routes to School representatives. They needed a parent from Kennedy to do that and go through all of the bike paths and look at key areas where we need traffic control. And it was a great experience. And one of the reasons it was so fun for me is because we moved to Kennedy or not to Kennedy, but to Woodhaven because of our bike path system. I mean, maybe that's a weird reason to move to a neighborhood, but that is why we bought a house in Woodhaven, because we use bike paths and we wanted our kids to have safe access to their schools, and we use it a ton. And our kids have been biking to school their whole lives. And now that our daughter is at Discovery, she bikes to Discovery as well. As soon as the snow melted, which was pretty late this year, but as soon as it was gone, she was on her bike to school and has been biking to Discovery every single day since then. So as I walked around with these Safe Routes representatives, I was able to ask their opinion about how if our neighborhood that goes to Kennedy gets shifted to Carl Ben, that would change all of our Safe Routes to School. And I was able to ask their opinions about, in the mindset of Safe Routes to School, does this make any sense? And clearly, they're interested in Safe Routes to School. So they were like, no, because you have beautiful bike paths all the way to Discovery, which our neighborhood uses, our kids use a great deal. And so I want to thank you so much for caring about Safe Routes to School. And I want you to continue to have that mindset as you think about where our kids go to middle school. Because biking to school isn't something that just elementary kids do. It's something that our middle school kids do too, and they need it for their healthy mindset as they enter the school building. I think all of us would agree that a bike ride to school is way healthier way to start the day than a 30-minute bus ride on a loud and screaming bus. So it's just a much better way to start anyone's day. My house is, according to Google Maps, it's 7.0 miles to Carl Ben. There's absolutely no way that my kids could have a safe route to school to bike or walk if they go to Carl Ben Eielson Middle School. And so I just really hope that when you get all this safe routes data, that you will consider safe routes not only for our elementaries, but also for our middle schools. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rebecca. Mr. Scott, David Scott.
Good evening. My name's David Scott, and I'm the father of Bailey and Riley, who attend Discovery Middle School. I've attended the past two Boundary Task Force meetings, and it appears the task force has been given a school capacity problem to solve. And they've set priorities to help guide their decision or recommendation. However, the guiding principles have now become part of the problem they are trying to solve. The issue has morphed from a problem of capacity to now a more complicated issue of balancing capacity and socioeconomics. Capacity is fairly easy to understand. If I increase square footage, we can increase capacity. However, in a recent Discovery edition, we've increased square footage but reduced the capacity at the school. Administration believes the numbers were projected to go up for Discovery, but they consciously reduced the capacity while making the major taxpayer investment. Socioeconomic impacts are more complicated than just looking at capacity. I don't believe that the task force could define the problem they are trying to solve by balancing socioeconomics. They just know they need to balance it, and they believe they will fix it, this undefined problem, by balancing the number of free and reduced lunches per school. So that drives all of their decisions. What problem are we trying to solve when we attempt to balance socioeconomics? Does the educational experience for a child with free and reduced lunch improve because a child that doesn't use free and reduced lunch moves from their neighborhood school to balance the free and reduced lunch numbers? Will the child that moves from their neighborhood school have a benefit or improved educational experience by moving to the new school to balance the free and reduced lunch numbers? Again, what problem are we trying to fix? I'm concerned with the message we will send our kids that they need to change schools to improve the socioeconomic numbers. And I'm concerned with the message you will send to the kids in the school that you feel needs their socioeconomic numbers balanced. I believe this focus on socioeconomic balance will create more division than balance and unity for our kids. Our family wholeheartedly believes it's not a person's income or net worth that creates their value. But this focus on socioeconomics is sending a clear message that someone does. It matters to someone. We all make decisions every day based off our personal values, principles, and priorities. By placing socioeconomics over neighborhood schools, safe bike and walkability, and transportation costs, I believe the board would go against their own stated values. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. Matt, is it Irish? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Matt Irish. I live at 4220 43rd Ave South. Today we'll address the issue of socioeconomic composition of schools in Fargo because that has been of such central importance in your task force's decisions, discussions, and decision making. To illustrate, if you review the task force's report of strengths and weaknesses of scenario 9.17, you will see that all but one of the 20 comments listed socioeconomic balance as a primary strength, and almost a third of the comments mentioned socioeconomic balance as the only strength. In contrast, the most common weaknesses noted by the task force concern the increased cost of travel time and the division of neighborhoods along arbitrary lines. The costs and consequences of a boundary line change cannot be denied. There is an increase in transportation costs of families and taxpayers when children's commutes are doubled. There is a cost of parent and children involvement in school activities as we drift away from our neighborhood school structure and make things less convenient. There is also an opportunity cost as we become unable to use these resources to invest in our kids. If you are asking parents and taxpayers to assume the costs of a boundary line change, you should provide some concrete rationale for the decision-making process and the benefits that will be gained. What specific outcome do you expect to improve at Carl Ben once Kennedy kids start attending? How will removing kids from Carl Bend and sending them to Ben Franklin benefit anyone? Do you have any tangible evidence to support these claims, or are they assumptions? For years, Fargo has been working to support and promote neighborhood schools. What evidence do you have that socioeconomic status and composition matters more than the documented benefits of neighborhood structure? Earlier this week, you received an email from my wife who summarized the lack of scientific evidence supporting the assumption that income balance alone matters for schools. But the things that do really matter are the things that the city and schools have already done. Evidence-based core curriculum, excellent teachers, equal resource distribution, after-school activities, safe routes to school, building strategies that promote blended SES neighborhoods, city infrastructure that supports neighborhood schools with increased feelings of community ownership and parent involvement. We don't doubt the good intentions of the task force members and appreciate their service to this cause, but we believe their process has been misguided by an unjustified emphasis on the wrong priorities, which undermines the validity of their recommendations. So please vote no on the proposed boundary change. There is no risk to waiting another year to ensure that the decision is supported by objective data and is in the best interest of all students. But if we rush forward with a boundary line change based on inaccurate information and assumptions, it will be very difficult to undo. We want to work together over the next year to find both a short-term solution and a long-term plan that will benefit all kids in the Fargo Public School system. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Jenny? I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, so please help us.
It's a code, neither are my students. So my name is Dr. Jenny Zark, and I live at 4761 41st Street South. So good evening, board members. I'm here tonight to express my concerns regarding the attendance boundary discussions. The Fargo Public Schools Wellness Policy 3250 for middle and high schools calls for, quote, at least an average of 250 minutes per week of physical education instruction and at least 50 minutes of additional physical activity. It goes on to say that schools should work with the community to create an environment that is safe and supportive of schools having the opportunity to be physically active when commuting to and from school, end quote. It goes on a little bit further and talks specifically about safe routes to school and states that the school district will assess and make needed improvements to make it safer and easier for students to walk and bike to school, end quote. So that means 300 total minutes of physical activity per week for every secondary student is stipulated. Yet, currently, our middle school students only have PE every other day for 50 minutes and no recess time. That's a sin. If boundary lines are changed without regard to geographical location, biking and walking to school for students in several parts of the city would become impossible. I attended the MetroCog Safe Routes Open House at Carl Bend on April 29th. And when I asked them to show me a potential safe route for bicycling from the Kennedy Elementary neighborhoods to Carl Bend, the reply was unanimous. By the way, I was the only parent there that night. And they said, there isn't one, it would be unsafe. And there wasn't much optimism that one could be created. In addition, increased distances would further hinder access to after-school activities for students who are unable to safely walk or bike to school. Data from the 2017 Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System conducted by the CDC showed that in North Dakota alone, we have 74% of our students in grades 9 through 12 who are not physically active at least 60 minutes a day. That's a shame. Additionally, 15% of these students are categorized as obese, and 16% are categorized as overweight. Thus, a third of high school students in North Dakota are currently overweight or obese, and we need to help them develop healthy habits earlier in life. Locally, because I know we like local data, Sanford Health's 2018 Community Health Needs Assessment, we had Cass County and Clay County key community stakeholders identify childhood obesity as a top priority. The prevalence of overweightness and obesity combined with lack of engagement in physical activity is really, really dangerous. We know that kids will have greater amounts of chronic health conditions, depression, lower self-esteem, and be more likely to become obese adults, facing similar health concerns with the addition of increased risks of many types of cancers. The current limited minutes of middle school physical education, combined with a lack of safe routes that would certainly result from many of the proposed boundary changes, would undermine the equity of access to educational opportunities and limit students' capacities to reach the nationally recommended 60 minutes of physical activity each day during the school year. Sedentary time would also increase as students travel longer distances and times on school buses to and from school. Given that a lack of physical activity engagement and a high percentage of overweightness and obesity among youth are already a local concern, any additional obstacles would simply exacerbate the issue. Additionally, physical activity engagement is significantly associated with both acute and long-term improved academic performance, better behavior in the classroom, and overall physical and mental wellness. Particularly executive function capabilities of the brain, which helps our students make better decisions and have better control of their impulses.
Jenny, thank you very much. Jerry. Jerry Standifer?
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jerry.
All right. My name's Jerry Standifer, and I live at 3546 Harrison Street South. I appreciate your guys' time tonight. So, there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, and there's two things that I love: data and why, right? It's what I live by. And the data usually explains the why. And what I'm really having a hard time understanding in this scenario is why these changes are necessary immediately, and then the data support that. And I don't need to speak anymore to the data related to numbers or anything. But what I do have a hard time with and struggle with is the distance that kids are going to need to travel to go to middle school crossing two interstates. It is, and these are from my house, it is 5.3 miles to Carl Ben Eielson from my front door, and it is 2.6 miles to Discovery. Now, in comparison, when I look at Longfellow to Carl Ben Eielson, it is 5.4 miles, and they don't cross any interstates. But I have not heard any discussion about Longfellow being moved at all. Now, that's neither here nor there, but that's just an example of what we're talking about. Now, the other reality from my side or from my front door is 5.5, 3.8, and 1.7. And those are the distances to the 3 West Fargo middle schools from my front door. So by, in essence, moving to Carl Ben Eielson, you're making my house closer to the middle schools in West Fargo, which just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Now, the purpose of the change is still unclear to me because I want to know why we're making these decisions. And Plan 9 really has been a focus since the start. I understand beyond just the basics of balancing socioeconomic status and the driving forces beyond that, but I also understand the importance of neighborhood schools. And I want to go back to what, Mrs. Nelson, what you said about the importance of relationships in schools, because you're absolutely right. It is the most important thing. It is the number one, whether they having one person in that school that you know cares about you, and having more is even more important, and having smaller schools, right? But what are we saying to kids, no matter where they're from, if we're busing them past a school to go to another school? And really, there's a couple of things I want to end with. Have we asked the kids being impacted about this? And not just the kids in our neighborhoods, but the kids that are going to be uprooted and moved further away. What do they think about this? And then two, there is a cost. There's the opportunity cost, there's cost to the parents, and there's a cost to the taxpayers. But there will be a cost to Fargo Public Schools. So I just put out a very simple question to the two neighborhoods on our side of the, in the two neighborhoods, well, no, all the neighborhoods in the Kennedy zones. Sorry, it's growing over there, right? And it was simple. It was, if these boundary changes, lines are shifted, will your children continue to attend Fargo Public Schools? And in less than 24 hours, we had almost 50 families saying that over 104 kids would no longer be in Fargo Public Schools. So that's significant as well. So these changes matter, and these are serious things that we're looking at. So, like I said, data and why. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Shannon Voller.
I live at 5057 Hawthorne Street South. So just concerning the discussions of the Building Capacity and Usage Task Force, current discussions focused solely on boundary changes are short-sighted. We as a school district are missing a huge opportunity to be innovative in our approach to education. 7 years ago, there was a long-range facilities task force that discussed the creation of magnet schools. They recognized there would be a need to address underutilized facilities in ways that simply moving boundaries would never achieve. It was a forward-thinking group. Yet despite those recommendations, here we are, 7 years later, in a situation with a task force that is laser-focused on changing boundaries. The most recent growth report for Fargo Public Schools on March 1st, 2019, shows growth at Davies High School, Discovery Middle School, and Kennedy Elementary has actually declined this year. There is no data to support the need for drastic boundary changes. This should be great news. It means we have time. We have time to think outside the box. We have time to ask ourselves, how can we do better? If you take a look, states all around us are doing unique things for their students. Moorhead is a great example of this with their plan to create a STEM center. Why aren't we having discussions about creating a magnet school? Why aren't the conversations at the task force about creating a STEM or career trades education center, a language immersion program? Workforce needs within the school system and changes in the way we deliver K through 12 education must happen. We need to be innovative. We need to take off the blinders and do what is best for all the students in the district. Growth reports show a boundary change isn't immediately needed. Put the needs of students and teachers of Fargo Public Schools foremost. Find creative solutions to keep Fargo on pace with other innovative school districts. Now is the time.
Thank you, Shannon. Tammy Lynn.
Board members and staff, I'm Tammy Lynn, 4910 Rose Creek Parkway South. And I feel like I've been on the hot seat because I am a member of the Building Capacity Task Force. And I'm a parent, I'm a teacher, however, and I have worked for Fargo Public Schools. At this time, I do not work for them, so but I came here today to give a little bit of insight on happenings in Fargo and future building developments. I have been to almost every city commission meeting in the last 4 years, and I know exactly what you're saying because I saw that trend happening. However, what's happening now should cause some anxiety because what I have seen over the past 4 years has really changed. There were plats that, I remember one in particular by Davies, that they were platted for 175 homes. Guess what? Boom, overnight the developer sold it because he couldn't make a profit. And guess what? The capacity went up to 300. Those are the kind of things that are happening. Since January of this year, many building development votes have and likely they have taken place, and they will either likely or for sure impact our future growth at Fargo Public Schools. The meetings are set up pretty easily. They're set up near the top of the agenda is the consent items. So if you had somebody go, basically at 5:15, there are the items on the agenda are for public votes. And so 5:15, and what I've done is I've made copies of just the consent items. So you all could see some of the impact of rest of what has been voted on for thus far. January was not a really big deal. January, basically, actually, that was the only time the zoning change would really limit went from a single dwelling residential and general commercial to just commercial. So that was the only one there. The next one is public hearings on 114. I won't go through all of these, but I just wanted to give you a flavor. The plat of Craig's Oak Grove Edition. These are things that have been in the works, and a lot of things are coming to fruition now. But if you take a look at some of these, even the St. Paul's Newman Center, this is the first time it came up, and it was finally approved about a month ago. But their capacity went up as well. I'm not going to go through those, but look at on 128, Golden Valley Second Edition, 6737 25th Street South, approval recommended. All that zoning went from agricultural to SR4, which is single dwelling residential. If we, as a building capacity task force, are looking at the future, I would strongly encourage someone to be appointed to attend these meetings. You don't have to attend them all, but I think it's really for me, it's been really interesting to watch the transitions. 211, this one was more the St. Paul Newman Center. 225, I thought that was an interesting one. Acquisition, that was really the Oak Grove Park and Christian land. This was something that I brought up to Dr. Gross, and I thought this was a perfect opportunity to go out of the box. The city of Fargo bought 224 acres that Oak Grove had donated. Of that, most of it's going to be used for water, for a lot of the drainage. There's 80 acres, and by the way, this is south of Walmart before 64th. And before 74th. So it's perfect. They're going to take 80 acres and develop it or sell it off. Keep in mind, it was donated, so it's not on the tax base right now, and now it's a city of Fargo, so there's no tax revenue. So that would be an opportunity to possibly do something. And I've attached, by the way, for all of you, just the letter, so you could see the Oak Grove development, and you could see what they're going to be doing with it. Anyway, I won't go through the rest of them, but you can see them for yourself. I think one of the things that I would suggest is that you have a liaison go, somebody that goes to those meetings. By the way, also at one committee meeting, and Dr. Gross was great because I talked to him about this, I said, did you know they're looking at a full possibility of full on-ramp, off-ramp interchange on 64th Avenue. Not just 74th, but 64th. I was at that meeting. They held it, they stopped it, they said, we're gonna do an investigation, we're gonna go to ADOT, it'll cost millions of dollars. But if you knew what that would happen, a full interchange at 64th, a full interchange at 74th, guess what? You are going to see development like you've never seen before in South Fargo. So I wanted to bring this up because I think probably on the building task force, I have a little bit different perspective just because I am very active in a lot of other things. So thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Victoria Johnson.
Thank you. I am not talking about boundary. I guess everybody's talking about the boundary. I am totally out. So I'm here to talk about safety and mental health. That has been the biggest topic that's been going around. So that ties up to the boundary because we have to consider mental health, right? If those children get moved, do we think about mental health? How's that going to affect them mentally, right? So that kind of ties up to what I'm going to talk about. We've seen over the couple weeks reports about teachers getting hurt in school, the number rising, but we have not seen a number of our students who are getting hurt. What are the numbers? Can you guys tell us? Because we want to know. As a mom, when I hear that on the TV getting announced over and over, our teachers are getting hurt. This is the numbers. How many of our students are getting hurt? And here's the numbers. We don't get that. It sounds like we're working against each other instead of working with each other. This is not about what the teachers' safety and the children's safety. We all want the same thing. We want that safety for our teachers. We want also safety for our students. But we're not hearing that. And then you hear a representative advising and saying, teachers, the best way to do this is sue the school. If workman's comp is not going to pay for mental health. Well, we can, as a parent, we can just take that advice as well and say, you know what, let's do the same thing because our students are getting severely traumatized in the school setting. So how do we work together and not have a media come in and divide us and making it sound like it's the teachers, the school against the parents with the children with disability? So that's something we need to work against together to find a better way to solve the safety issue that's going on in our school system. Because it is a major problem. It is happening. But how do we work together? The solution is what we need to come up with, not just encouraging the other side and say, this is your way, sue the school. Okay, let's go ahead and do that then. And then where's the problem? Do we solve the problem? No, we don't. Because safety is the biggest concern that's going on in our school. As a parent, I have friends who are teachers. So I understand. And I, as a mother, have a child who's with disability, and I have a child who's not disabled. And so he too gets affected because he watches that. He watches those struggle children with disability have in the school. So he watches that. An incident happened in his middle school. He's not a talker. He never talks. He never gets in trouble, nothing. He comes home, I hear from another parent, and I ask him, I go, what happened at your school today? And he just looked at me, and he didn't know what to say. And he just said, Mom, it was scary. That's all he said. So just to see that, to hear him just say that, and then make me ask, was this child bib being followed? That's our biggest problem in the school. Children, IEP, teachers are not following it. Is it lack of training? Because they don't understand the children bib. Because if I, for example, I told them, do not call my son by nickname, call him by his name. It says on his bib, yet the teachers don't follow it. So are they getting proper training?
Thank you very much, Victoria. Don Barth.
Good evening. I'm Dawn Barth, reside at 1621 7th Avenue South. I'm a 17-year-old veteran of children in the Fargo Public Schools, 2 still in the school, so we have about 5 years to go. I will second with what Victoria said. I want to share a success with you. My oldest daughter just graduated from UND on Saturday, and as I was sitting there for 3 hours, I had a lot of time to reflect on what made her successful. You guys did, the school district did. She had a career in mind when she was 7 or 8 years of age. She was going to be a marine biologist. And as she got to high school, she had one teacher that really stood out. And as Robin had mentioned, relationships, and you know, it's not trivial because her career changed. She decided to go into, medicine. And so she graduated with athletic training, and now she's going to go on to med school. And really the school, I look back, that's what built her up. And so I really want to thank all of you for that. On the other end of that spectrum, I have a 13-year-old child in special education. And that's been the hardest part for me as a parent is I never knew special education before that. It was always general education. So I was on the outside looking in, and it's totally different. And I'll tell you, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. When you really know what you're doing, which I feel like I finally, after 5-6 years, I have a good grip on the IEP, the BIP, all of that, you're going to be safe, you're not going to get cut. But there was a time, as he was coming through elementary school, I don't think he was supported. He had one relationship with a teacher that I'll call an angel that really saved her. But beyond that, until we got to middle school, why did it have to lead to that point? He didn't have the support that I feel that he needed. He didn't get the, his IEP obviously wasn't being followed. He finally let us know about 10 months ago that he was being secluded from 2nd to 5th grade. How did I not know? I was on the PTA board. How could that have gone under my radar? When I think back, it didn't. I saw the red flags. But as a parent, you trust who you're sending your kids to. And I feel we're in a better place now, but there's parents that are dealing with where we were at. And so that's why I'm passionate that I want to support those people. There's great teachers here. I want to see a pay raise for those teachers. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. My child's doing great now, but why did it have to go the way it did to get to the point that we are? I think the safety, I trust my children now. I don't trust the school to tell me my children are safe. I trust my children. I ask them every day, how was your day? Good, bad? Do you feel safe at school? No one can guarantee our kids' safety, but we can do the best that we can, and I think we need to look, as Victoria said, training, better training. Some of those paras didn't even know my child was on an IEP in elementary school. I found out at 5th grade that as a parent, I had to go tell everybody, the gym teacher, everybody that my child, had autism. I didn't know that was my responsibility. When you're in special education, no one tells you those things. So it is a very hard pill to swallow. But again, we're doing okay now. I really commend my son's middle school. They worked really hard, and they've had to put up with me because, as the saying goes, if you don't heal from the people who have hurt you, you're gonna bleed on the people that haven't. And so I'm working hard to get to that point, but I'm also not trusting as much as I used to. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you for everyone signing up this evening and sharing your thoughts with us. Moving on to item 5 of our agenda, staff reports. Jim? Sure, we could take a 5-minute break, so back at about 5 to 7, a little bit before. Thank you. it's 4-7. Moving on to item number 5, staff reports, an FEA report.
I'll try to keep this really brief. My name is Jim Erlacher. I'm the middle school representative for Fargo Education Association. I'm a Spanish teacher at Discovery Middle School. I think the last time Lynette told you that we were in the process of electing our officers for next year, that is done. We had our retirement social to honor our retirees, which is always a good time. We're also in the process of awarding scholarships to our seniors at all of the 4 high schools. On a note of Discovery, I am very much looking forward to maybe when I come back in the fall, much more of the construction being done. And just last week, we had a very large school ceremony to honor one of our teachers who was going through breast cancer, Sarah Barnum, and we raised $4,500 for her. We had a head shaving event, which it was awesome to see over 1,000 kids in the gym shaving their teachers' heads, and I was fortunate enough to be one of those people who got to shave a colleague's head, so there we go. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us. Superintendent's report, Mr. Gandhi.
Sure. So I will also be a little bit briefer today, but this is also very important stuff. I think this is the first time at a board meeting we get to publicly acknowledge all of our teacher, paraprofession, our support staff, and administrator of the year, because those have been revealed now. So I just want to say Sue Brenneman, Jennifer Free, and Travis Hogue were our support staff of the year, our administrator of the year, and our teacher of the year, and we are just incredibly proud of all of the work that they've done and what they do to exemplify our mission of educating and empowering all students to succeed. So we are extremely excited for all of them. We had great celebrations, and we look forward to hearing from them at our staff opener in the fall.
Thank you for that. On to the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. On to business. Item A, 2019-20 meal prices, memo 95. Does this come from you, Christy, I believe?
Delayed just a bit. We spoke with Cindy. She had come into our planning meeting and presented the action as far as requiring the regulation 7 CRF, section 210.14E, requires school food authorities participating in national school lunch programs to ensure sufficient funds are provided to the nonprofit school food service account for meals served to students not eligible for free and reduced meals. Schools currently charging full-pay students less than the USDA's target rate are required to increase prices annually. USDA target rate for pricing is $3. The district's comparable price is $2.53. Per the USDA regulation, the district is required to raise lunch prices. On May 3rd at the Planning Committee meeting, we reviewed prices. Elementary lunch would be increased by a nickel, secondary by a nickel, and adult lunches by a nickel. At this point, I move to approve the nutrition services meal price increase of 5 cents for elementary, secondary, and adult lunches.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, a motion by Christy, second by Brandy. Any discussion? Robin?
I think it'd be worth explaining the rationale for raising prices.
Jim?
I think the thought process of the federal government is that what they give us for the free and reduce people that they're funding should not be offsetting the cost of those that wouldn't qualify. So if there's not a close proximity to what the government is going to give us for a reimbursement to what we charge families that aren't eligible for that, then theoretically we're supplanting, using those federal food dollars to supplant the cost for people that aren't eligible. So that's the rationale behind it.
Clarify question. Thank you for expanding on that. In the past, I understood that what the impetus for raising the rates was to ensure that we bought healthier food. So has that shifted away from that?
Christy, I know you had your hand up at one point as well.
No, we are still looking at that, and they have been implementing some of those programs in different schools, and we'll continue to look at opportunities.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Anne Marie, would you please call the roll?
Benson.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Brian Nelson.
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes.
Paulson.
Yes.
Rodenbiker.
Yes.
Ulrich.
Yes.
Ani.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Item 7B, EL 14 changes, memo 96. This comes from the Governance Committee. The Governance Committee met to discuss this policy. We had it monitored at the March 26th board meeting. There was some discussion about some language. It's on the flip side of this, the printout for the meeting this evening, that basically ended up being duplicative. Item 6 and number 9. There was a recommendation at the Governance Committee meeting to strike number 9 and add that language to the latter part of the sentence of number 6. So I would entertain a motion for approval as presented.
So moved.
Christie?
Second.
Okay, motion by Christie, second by Robin. Any discussion? All right, Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Johnson.
Yes.
Brian Nelson.
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes.
Paulson.
Yes.
Rodenbiker.
Yes.
Ulrich.
Yes.
Ani.
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. 7C, outside liaison assignment review, memo 97. Looking through here, it looks like there are a couple of liaison assignments where there are recommendations for possibly discontinuing. Looks like Jim, the Blue STEM liaison assignment, and Robin, I know you mentioned the PTA. So what I'm wondering is maybe the process, for example, regarding Blue STEM. What would the recommendation be there, Jim? Do you have thoughts on how to proceed?
Yeah, well, I actually think that's an administrative committee, so I don't think it requires board action to disconnect it. I believe the superintendent could choose to. It would be my recommendation because for those that are new to the board, this committee came into existence through an unfortunate scenario. The organization that was operating the Blue STEM facility ended up going financially insolvent, so the district had to take it over. And there was some concern in the community that that would disconnect the rest of the arts community from being able to use the facility, things like concerts, other types of organizations that might want to use it. So that was the formation of this committee, which was made up of people from the city of Moorhead, the higher education area of Moorhead, as well as the public schools, and obviously folks on the Fargo side. And we had a school board member on it as well. Actually, I think 2 school board members at one time. And it was pretty functional for about 2 years, but then it rapidly became apparent that Blue STEM was blossoming under Fargo Public Schools guidance, and in particular, I'll tip my hat to Kathy, who's done an outstanding job with her team. And I think you're all aware of the fact that it seems to be the go-to outdoor concert venue of the metro area now, and is used by multiple parties in our community, business, individuals renting it, other arts organizations. So for the last 2.5 years, to the best of my knowledge, the committee has not actually had a meeting, mostly because there is no angst in the community anymore about that transfer of control back over to the Fargo School District. So, you know, obviously, if our superintendent wants to keep that committee, then I think we should continue to have a school board member as a liaison on it. But it would be my recommendation to, at this point in time, probably to disband the committee, and if the need in the future comes up, start it up again.
Dr. Gandhi, do you have any comments to share?
Yeah, I would recommend, I would agree with Jim's recommendation. At this point, since I've started, there's only been one time where the advisory committee came up, and that was almost an additional layer. It was when we were looking at some grant applications at Blue STEM, and there's almost a conversation about, okay, what is there an advisory board or an advisory committee? And that's kind of what started this conversation. Well, they haven't really met, and should that really be the authority over any grant applications, or should that reside within Fargo Public Schools, since we manage that facility and manage that budget as well? So we would recommend dismantling the committee and continuing with that piece.
Okay, and the information here is for this, our review of the outside liaison assignments, it's for information only, so there's really, from what I understand, no official business that we're planning on taking here. Robin?
I would recommend that when we do our reorganizational meeting, this information is taken under consideration for what we continue with. Some of these are in our control, some of them aren't. For example, the Native American Commission requires that we have a school board member, so those need to be prioritized. But I would leave that up to the governance committee to make recommendations to the reorganizational time in July, I believe. But this is great feedback. Some of these also are out of our control. City PTA is being absorbed into state. So all of those things need to continue to be analyzed and updated.
That's a recommendation that I'm fine with, and there were a few suggestions too that we might be able to explore prior to the time of that meeting, or at least surrounding the time of that meeting, to even see if the options that were suggested are viable, or if the other organizations are interested in, in us being involved. So I guess maybe we need to do a little bit of homework so that we can make some decisions. So everyone okay with Robin's suggestion? All right, thank you very much. All right, we have another item on our business agenda, item D, and it says it's updated data projection, and I have Jennifer's name here. And I would indicate first, hold on, so, I don't mean.
Before you move to that, can I ask you a question though, before you say that, about C?
Yes, sure.
Just a clarifying question on how we operate. Aren't we supposed to make a move under business, or should this be really under board reports? Yes?
Jim is nodding his head, yes. Has our practice been, Anne Marie, to have this under business?
I think when we added, because this is a newer report that you guys added a couple years back, we had it under business in case somebody needed to take action to remove one, versus putting it under board reports.
Okay, that helps explain why it's here, because, well, just from what Anne Marie said, if anyone wants to make a motion to this report, that's perfectly fine, but there's not one that's recommended. That doesn't mean that there can't be one. Jennifer?
Well, I actually, under mine, I do have 2 recommendations on the bottom. So, I mean, I'm okay with, since we have the whole board here, if we want to take them one by one, if there's recommendations to either discontinue or to add, that we have the conversation now, since we did put it under business.
So I think from what I heard regarding the conversation earlier, and you could even make, if you want to make a motion, and then we can talk through that, but what I did hear from the conversation earlier is that this information would move to governance. So similar to some of our other recommendations when we go through our policies and, how we take action there. So then those suggestions would move through up to governance. But again, if someone wants to put a motion on the floor, then we can have official discussion about it. I'm fine with either way. Jennifer?
So I guess I'll make a motion that we act on each one of these recommendations right now.
Is there a second? So if there's no second, then the motion fails. All right, thank you, but I will commit that this will go on to our governance agenda for discussion. Anne Marie will help make sure that it gets there. All right, then on to item D, and what my recommendation was going to be is if there's a motion for item D, updated data projection, that be made right away, and then we can, if there's a second to it, and then we can have discussion from that point on versus any discussion first. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start with the motion. So my ask is that we direct administration to include the actual attendance numbers in addition to any other important or timely information needed to be provided to the task force for their analysis, any relevant data moving forward.
Anne Marie, do you need that in writing right now?
Jennifer, do you have that in writing? Could I?
Well, I have scribbles, but I can give it to you.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, I'd like the motion reread, and I want to make sure that Anne Marie has it officially in the minutes, and then we can have discussion, so between Anne Marie and Jennifer, so that we can have clarity. Jennifer, could you please reread?
Sure. So my ask is that we direct administration to include the actual attendance numbers at our facilities in addition to, and I'm adding now, to the RSP data that they have, just to clarify. So my ask is that we direct administration to include the actual attendance numbers and any other important, timely information needed to the task force, any relevant information needed in order for them to make educated, informed recommendations.
How are you doing, Anne Marie? Typing away.
So Jennifer, would it be accurate to say that you move to a direct administration to include the actual attendance numbers at our facilities in addition to the RSP data and any other timely information needed to the task force for them to make informed decisions?
Okay, so is there any discussion? Robin?
I have a clarifying question. So it makes sense to include the attendance numbers. Who would be the judge of any other relevant information? Because it would be irresponsible for me to vote against that, but it's also calling our administration irresponsible for not providing relevant information. So based upon this discussion, I might divide the question for just to clarify.
Jennifer?
You're asking me? Thought that was just up for discussion. Any other relevant information? I guess we've been provided a lot of information over the last several weeks. And it seems like there's city data that could also be talked about. We had a presentation even this evening about current land usage and availability that maybe should be considered at this task force level, or at least talked about when we're making future decisions. So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about when I say additional relevant information.
Jim?
I have a question for Christy or Bob, Missy, or Rupak. I'm assuming when you gave them the building capacity report, you showed them the current attendance numbers. Am I incorrect?
We are sharing the current numbers when we run the different scenarios. So what we have done is we have geocoded all of our students. That's part of the software. So when we first ran the original, or what the current boundary scenario is, that would include the students who were there. That was in April. The software is updated every month, so we have not run the May numbers, so we could do that update. But other than that, we have shared the number of students in the different buildings.
So the actual numbers already. Is that correct? And I get that they change every day.
Yes.
So they were given.
Yes.
So the first half of this motion has already occurred at the time that you gave them.
Yes. We ran the scenarios, both current and every other scenario, with an April 1st pull from our system.
Thank you.
Robin?
Thank you for that clarifying question. So I still need to understand who will be the judge of relevant information and how can we hold administration responsible for supplying certain information? Are we directing administration to give certain information? I'm not clear. Who's going to be
So-
the judge of that?
So my understanding from RUPAC was that the only information being provided is RSP projections. This is where I get my information, okay? So what I'm saying to you is, my understanding is administration doesn't believe they can give additional updated information unless directed by the board.
Thank you.
Rupak?
The parameters that were given to the task force on our February 12th work session from the board were to use the RSP projections to make secondary boundary changes to solve the capacity issues based on those projections. So if we are looking at, that's the parameters that we're working with. The actual attendance numbers for this year have been provided through that process when every time a scenario is run, and we compare it to our base scenario, that base scenario is a current enrollment at those secondary schools. If we are going to add additional information or take into consideration any of the additional information that you're saying, and if that's for the purpose of not doing the boundary changes or saying, make a recommendation not to do that, then I think that would be the guidance that we would seek from the board, because we were going off of, at the February 12th work session, we were told, here's RSP projections. Based off of these projections, go for it and have the task force look at secondary boundary recommendations. So that's the parameters that we've been working with.
Robin, was your question, was it relevant information? Was that the phrase that you were referencing?
Indeed, yeah. Who is going to determine what is relevant information?
So, yeah, I have a challenge on that too, and I don't know if it would help us walk through this if we divided it or not, divided the question, but I do believe that administration is providing relevant information and using their professional knowledge and experience and information that is gathered from the meetings within the city and multiple sources of information, even though there's a lot of discussion, of course, regarding RSP, because that's the group that we use to, and that we've relied on for so long to help us make projections. And we don't only, other districts across the nation rely on RSP data. So I don't believe that administration is not providing information that's relevant. That doesn't mean that there can always be additional information, but I personally don't want to be the judge of what is relevant. And I would also assume that the information that we are receiving as board members, some of those emails and the discussions here this evening, that also goes to administration. Maybe not all, but some. Some of it goes to administration as well as all board members. So my personal thought is that, and I would trust that information is being digested by the leaders of our task force and helping to guide the conversations. And if it's not, I would be disappointed in that. But I have the feeling that it is being taken into consideration. Christy?
When we talk about city presentations, and I know Tammy Lynn tossed out some city numbers tonight, but the city has presented twice to us at the task force meeting. They presented the first evening and they presented again last week. And so they are providing us with information to assist us as task force members.
And Jim, did you have your hand up, and then Jennifer?
I sure did. I first of all have a problem with this motion because, number one, I believe the actual attendance numbers were provided, and this would indicate that they weren't. And I get that we didn't give them today's attendance numbers yet, but if they have the April numbers, that's about as current as I would expect to get data. And I actually think a motion saying provide any other important and relative information implies that hasn't been done, which I think is a disingenuous motion to put in front of us, especially when it wasn't vetted at governance to begin with, to give everybody time to digest this. So from my perspective, I think they have the actual attendance numbers, and I believe they are working with the relevant information. So I think this motion isn't needed.
Jennifer and then Christy.
So I think just by seeing this graph put in front of us, this data was never shared at the task force. I too have been at every task force, and I heard the introduction from administration saying we are growing on an average of 100 students a year. That's not correct. Our recent RSP data is not accurate. It is not 99.5% accurate. And to your point, Rebecca, where you say you would hope that the data and the emails that are being received by administration are also being shared when they are true, is not happening because the administration currently believes that they cannot share that information unless the board has directed them to do so. At least that's what I've been told.
Christy.
From a task force liaison, each time we have, as to Bob's words, each time we've received the different scenarios, going 1 through 11, and then there's point, all of these other ones, there's always the front page that says current. And so we always have that reference for current, and that's the one that goes to the April numbers, and those are presented each time on every scenario.
Jim.
I understand the problem with the RSP data. It's been the same problem since the first year we used them, Jennifer. But your motion has nothing to do with the RSP data whatsoever. You wanted to direct us, or the administration, to give them the actual attendance numbers. They have that already, and any other relevant information. If the relevant information that you want shared with the task force is that the RSP reports are not accurate, I'll bet that's actually occurred.
I beg to differ. It hasn't. It's been told that, and I've heard many say 99% accurate, and it's not true. And additionally, they have not pointed out that these are declining numbers. Even if they are saying on each piece of paper, this is the number, you have not said, you have misled the individuals. They do not know that the enrollment is declining.
I would have, okay, Rupak and then David, but I also have a question in regard to the current data, that first part of the motion, because I understand how it's been shared. So it's been shared in a way. It's been shared through those exercises. What I'm wondering is was there another way? Is there a specific way, Jennifer, that you were thinking that that information ought to be shared? Is there a specific kind of a report, something in writing? Is it in a different way than it already has been presented? And then on the other side, in regard to relevant information, that it's very vague. I'd like to see that specified. I'd like to see. I'm going with Jim a little bit with what you're saying here in terms of this conversation we haven't had an opportunity to discuss this even at a governance level where we might be able to kind of vet through this a little bit and put more specificity to it. I would seek for more specificity, and I would also feel if I were an administrator, it would be hard for me to decide what's relevant information and what am I not. I wouldn't know how am I measured and how am I, So I guess I would look for, no matter if I would be supporting or not supporting the motion, more specificity to help me make my decision. But Rupak, I think you would like to share first.
Sure, and I think Jennifer, there you are right, but a couple of things. I'm going to go back to the guidance from administration going back to our work session. We have been using RSP because that's the projections that we presented to the board, and then at February 12th, we said based on these projections is our guidance to make secondary boundary changes to alleviate the overcrowdedness that's projected at Discovery and Davies. So that's where we've been given. I have not shared every piece of information that's come via email to our task force members. We've tried to stay ahead of it and share some of the concerns that are impacting boundaries, but some of the suggestions that have been made regarding, changing configurations, doing a 9th grade center on the south side of town or the north side of town, things of that nature. We have not done that because we have not been given that guidance from the board. If the board is telling us that is what we want to explore, then we would need that guidance, and that's what we asked on February 12th, because I specifically said there's a wide variety of ways we could do this. Me coming in new, I know our past practice, which was this board had decided, not this literally, but the board had decided that we wanted equal configurations across all parts of town. We were using RSP projections. Based on those projections, boundary changes was the option. Now, if we're saying that's not the scope of the task force, then that changes our work, and I would need board consensus to change that, because that's what we're going off of. This could be as big as we want it in terms of how we want to go in terms of this task force, which is why we asked for specific parameters, and that parameter was look at boundary changes. So if we're saying RSP data is wrong or don't look at boundary changes, I would look for board guidance to do that.
David, and then Jennifer?
As part of as you know, as part of our liaison visits, we are asked to attend PTA meetings. And this was brought to my attention that at the PTA meeting I went to, there were 3 people from the building and task force. And they said that the only attendance numbers they got were the numbers that were given to them based on the RSP report. They had seen no other numbers. And they questioned why those numbers were being used when the enrollment in their particular school was basically flatlined. And it wasn't a discussion I was leading, it was a discussion I was sitting there listening to, and this is what these people were saying. And 3 of those people were on the task force and had been attending all of the meetings. So that's where the concern came, for me.
I know we have Dr. Gross, Jennifer, Rupak, Robin. Dr. Gross.
Like I stated earlier, each of the times we run a scenario, we do a cover page. And that cover page does include the current data. All of those packets of information that have been given to the task force members are on the website. So individuals can go back and download the scenario packets, and there is the cover page on each of those that run the current numbers.
Jennifer.
Okay, let's see if I can remember how many questions you asked me. And describe for you the reason that I included other important information was really just to allow for the flexibility, because day by day we may learn something new. Some of us may have learned something new today about the availability or possibility of land out west. I mean, perhaps that should play into this task force conversation if we're talking about the future of our district. And we're talking about the future of our district. We're talking about the number of students in each of our facilities, and what is our long-range plan. And you guys, when we decided, or when administration and the board decided however many months ago that this was going to be the plan for these task force, it was the name of the task force changed from Boundary Task Force to Building, Facility, and Usage, because it wasn't just about a few buildings that were reaching capacity. It was about buildings that were also underutilized. What happened to that? Why did we let go of that? Why did we stop future planning? It just seems like such a limited scope when we have such a huge opportunity here for the district to really be innovative. And if these numbers are showing us a slow and that we're not going to be overcrowded, why aren't we taking this time to do some of these innovative things that the last task force talked about 7 years ago? These cool magnet programs that are happening in many other states. Why aren't we taking the time to do that? Instead, we're just going to shift around 250 families and then maybe shift them back when we build a new middle school. I mean, it seems like a Band-Aid, not a long-range plan.
Rupak, and then Robin.
I would say that if everything that you're sharing is a consideration for the board, that would be the guidance that we see, right? Going back to where we started, because I go back to, we've been using RSP projections. These were the projections. The only piece to your comment that I would challenge is that when we go look at our February 12th work session minutes and we look at the parameters, and we said, because Discovery and Davies, we also noted that the buildings on the north side of town, so Ben Franklin and North High School, were going to be underutilized, and that's why we wanted to do, that's why the parameter said to address the potential overcapacity at Discovery and Davies and the underutilization of Ben North High School, we would look at boundary changes, and that was the guidance that was given to us. Conversations about magnet schools, different programs, I think on that work session, we did start the conversation about an elementary immersion program as well. If we want to have that conversation, administration has no problem of having that conversation, but that wasn't the scope of the task force that was given to us. And if we're going to say we're going to lead with the programs that we want to do and then look at boundaries, then tell us to do that versus the other way around, which is let's look at the current enrollment and look at our building capacity and usage, make the boundary changes, and then we can also look at those programs. Like I said before, this was never the long-range facilities plan task force. It's the building capacity and usage task force. We had a couple of recommendations coming out of our previous task forces. One of them was two of them for our early childhood special education and our potential for our LRED facility. They no longer are considerations for this task force for two reasons. One is that at the February 12th work session, we were told not to touch elementary boundaries. And then secondly, because the LRED facility would not take up existing space. It would be additional square footage. The potential for a CTE program, that is being discussed because that would change how many students could potentially change in their boundaries from Davies to South High School if we expand a CTE program there. So we are just, again, seeking guidance in terms of where does the board want us to go? And if we are going to say, we know that RSP are projections. If we're going to say that missing the mark between RSP's projection and our actual enrollment numbers should merits us discarding any boundary recommendations, then what is the other piece of data that we're going to rely on? And then what are we going to do to get to that task force? That would be my only question to the board, and that's where we kind of seek guidance.
Robin. So on February 12th, when we had the work session, well, let me back up. How many years have we been using RSP? I know it's long before you. Is it 7, 8 years?
Dr. Flowers' time, I believe.
No, it was started with Dr. Schatz.
Okay, so 7 years. We unanimously agreed to use that during the task force. This has never been an issue. We have never discredited RSP's projections until 2 months ago. So it's very unfair of the board to change the direction based upon no new information that we gave administration. If we continue to change the direction for administration partway through the task force, it discredits the process. I understand if there was new data available, but RSP's never been discredited before, so I think we're not liking what we're learning. I also think that it's important to let the task force do their job and make the recommendations and let the board vet that information then. We could vote down what they recommend, but that's what we need to do, and I really think we are harming. I've heard from many people on the task force that are feeling very threatened by the communication they're receiving. They're feeling very threatened by the crowds that are at the meetings. Some of them are afraid to go. We are causing the process harm, and I really think that we owe them that responsibility to respect their voices. We owe our administration the respect to allow them to take the direction that we gave them. And shame on us, board, if we gave them bad information or we gave them bad direction, but let the process finish and then let it come back to the board and we'll handle it there. That would be my recommendation.
Jim, and then I have a comment, and Jennifer.
I couldn't echo that even more beautifully than you said it, Robin. This task force was given a direct charge by this board for us to change the rules on them at this point in time. Shame on us if we do it. And I don't know where everybody has gotten this idea that as soon as those recommendations come to us, one of them will be implemented. We've known for quite a while that the growth in South Fargo has been slowing down. We also know it's where the growth is going to happen. So we may not be overcrowded. About a year and a half ago, I think I sat in a boardroom and told people, this problem's probably 3 to 4 years away. Other people were thinking that it was maybe 1 or 2 years away, so it was like the sky was falling. Now it might be 4 or 5 years, or 6. The work this task force is doing is still going to be valuable to us, whether we choose to implement it immediately or realize, no, we've got 2 to 3 years before we have to worry about the overcrowding, and things could develop in that time to change things. So for us to disconnect or change this process at the 11th hour, because I think they're about done, I don't know how many more meetings you have scheduled, 1 or 2 I'm guessing, is beyond me. I'm going to move that we table this motion and address it at a future board meeting.
I need some help with
Second.
Robert's Rules of Order. How does that work, Anne Marie?
No, you don't.
Anne Marie?
Do you mean to table it in the essence of putting it aside and taking up later in the meeting, or do you wish to postpone it to a certain time,
Yeah, I tabled it till our next meeting.
till the next meeting? Okay.
So Anne Marie, there's been a motion and then a second. Are we able to have discussion on that?
There's no debate on that motion, no amendment, and a majority needs to pass it.
So then you could call the roll?
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Roenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
No.
Benson,
No.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes. Motion passes. Now, does that take care of the original motion as well?
It tables
for-
the
for
motion
today it
till
does,
the next
yes.
meeting.
Okay. All right, on to board reports. Item A, school liaison visit discussion, memo 98. So again, this is from our policy GP2E. We all, as board members, are responsible for conducting formal visits to our liaison schools. We do that a couple times during the year and file official reports. And so these reports are from our second official visits. Doesn't mean we've only been to our schools 2 times, but we have those 2 reports. Does anyone have anything specific that they would like to share? Any comments? Christy, and did anyone else have the hand up? Jennifer and David. Christy first, please.
Just want to apologize. My official reports were not turned in the proper time, but I have my visits completed.
Thank you, Christy. David.
I just have a question. Discovery was one of my schools. Did the capacity of Discovery actually go down, as it states, by 50 people or whatever? Because I've gone through the school, there were no classrooms that have been eliminated. There were special ed rooms that seem to have been added, and yet the capacity numbers say it went down.
Dr. Gross?
There are 9 teen centers at Discovery Middle School. Each of those then have 5 classrooms. In our long-range facility plan, we talk about an average of 24 students in each of our science classrooms and 26 in all of our other classrooms. So that capacity then is between that 1,100 and 1,050. So that is the capacity range of that building. Based upon that, if every classroom had a total of 24 students in every science classroom, 26 students in every other classroom.
Does that answer your question, David?
No, because we didn't eliminate any of those classes. So how did, it's been, haven't we listed the capacity of Discovery's around 1,200?
Under those parameters, you would not have 1,200 students in that building. You would have to go beyond what's in the long-range facility plan with targets for students in each classroom to get to 1,200 students. So could we do that? Yes, but our class size average would be greater than what's in that plan.
Jennifer?
Those were RSP set numbers, correct? Did they not use the same parameters and the same numbers in terms of guiding principles for class size?
The numbers come from the district ourselves, and it was when Dr. Rachel Agri was still with the district. She went from building to building at the elementary. I went from building to building at the secondary level, counting classrooms, counting ancillary spaces for Title I, special education, and so on. And that's when we redid the boundary capacity at all of the buildings. There is a board report. I'd have to go back and find the date, but that's where that was articulated and shared with the board, the work that was done as we went from building to building, looking at classroom spaces and ancillary spaces.
Is there anything else regarding board reports?
I'm still
Jennifer.
confused. I'm still confused, Bob. Where did the first 1,200 come from then? The number.
I do not know where the number 1,200 came from. That had been a capacity in the past, but again, when we use the rules that are part of the long-range facility plan and counted classrooms, we're not at 1,200 students at Discovery.
I know that there are some comments from the school liaison visit. There are some comments from the school liaison visit forms that have some suggestions, maybe just to administration to further some concerns or comments. I put a couple in there that were shared when I went in for my visit, so this information also can be taken back. If there's anything administration, obviously, feel free to go through and respond as you feel fit. So we'll file this report, Jennifer.
I actually did list some questions, and I don't know if anyone from administration has had a chance to, well, hopefully you have, had a chance to read through them, but given our conversation this evening, perhaps would be a good time to maybe answer a few of them, if you have answers to them.
If you'd like to talk about them right now, that'd be fine.
Sure. So when I visited Davies, clearly the number of students came up and the mix of students came up, and I shared with you in my report that I was given the number of free and reduced across the district, at Davies being 20, North being 23, and South being 35, as well as some of the other special ed and ESL numbers. And the staff there wanted me to know that they felt like, in terms of, because this conversation around socioeconomic mix has been the primary focus of the task force, they wanted me to know that they feel from their perspective they are balanced, and they too asked the question, what gets better? What is the problem that we're trying to fix? Why are we overlooking so many other guiding principles? And so I included these in my questions because they're not just my questions, but I think they're important questions to be asked and answered. And what sort of better opportunities, or what difference is it going to, we heard it from some of the people, from some of the parents tonight. And so it's here, and I think it's an opportunity for administration to really address. And I'm sincerely asking, what problem are we trying to fix?
Rupak?
Going back to the charge of the task force, our number one priority is the task that we were given. The problem that we were told to fix was a potential for Davies and Discovery to be over capacity. So when we run those scenarios, yes, the free and reduced lunch rates are ran, so our special ed percentage, I believe, and other indicators. But the first thing that we want to look at or the recommendation that the task force gives to the board will be the capacity and the enrollment at those numbers. How will the boundaries change those numbers? After that, there is the long range of guiding principles are in the long range facilities plan. I was not part of the conversations when the board adopted those, so I would defer back to the board in saying, what was the conversation behind there? I mean, if we want to just talk about the mix of socioeconomics, I'm sure we can find research on both sides of that argument. But our first priority is, in the charge that we were given, these two buildings are going to be over capacity, one in 3 years and one in 5 years, I believe. The other two buildings on the north side of town are going to be under capacity to do boundary changes. So hopefully administration would not bring a recommendation to you that would not alleviate those two concerns. Now, I would also delineate between administration's recommendation and the task force recommendation, since we've been told to kind of step back and let task force do that piece. But that has been the biggest problem that we want to solve is if we are relying on RSP numbers and if we are going off of that, then the problem we try to fix is those overcapacity issues.
So the task force's assignment was to talk about boundaries and about the fact, we talked about the growth. I mean, we've had a lot of conversation about that this evening. And so, and then the guiding principles can be taken into consideration in making those decisions. They weren't rated by the board in terms of priority because they were to be taken into consideration with that broader conversation of boundary lines. And so the task force also had a conversation. I feel like we're kind of off our liaison visit report here, but again, the task force members did have a conversation and had the opportunity to rank, to prioritize those for their own conversations. And we are going to be able to have the opportunity, because we already voted this evening again and voted at our prior meeting, the task force is continuing its work. And we're going to have the opportunity as a board to take the information that the community members that have volunteered all these hours, you know, to provide us with their ideas, their recommendations. And I'm so happy that we have people in our community that have signed up to participate. I'm happy that we have had people here speaking this evening and that we have received the email communication that we have. It's all valuable. We can all take that as board members and utilize that information when it comes time for us to make the decisions. Right now, the task force is trying to do its work. It's trying to do its work. So I would like the questions that I would like us to be back on the school visit reflection forum conversation. And I would like just questions here that administration feels also needs to be answered. Mine were suggestions. That doesn't mean that you need to follow up. Mine were suggestions from my reports. And I would, if there are some specifics that we need to bring from this, I'd like it brought to governance, so we can have some organized, thoughtful time and planful time for the conversation, because it's not that it's not important, but we need to be able to have time set aside for it appropriately. Are there any other comments regarding the liaison visit reports? Okay. Committee liaison and correspondence reports. Brian, let's start with you, and Robin, you can end this time.
Okay. I attended the GAC committee meeting this morning, chaired by Robin, and thank you, Robin and Brandy and Jim and Rebecca for all the work that you guys did over this legislative year. And it was a good committee, and appreciate all that you did. Robin will report on that, I would imagine. I was also attended the Lewis and Clark building as one of my liaison assignments. And I'm glad that Jason reported tonight. I don't know if many of you know what Envoy is. I'm embarrassed to say I have 31 years of education. It became new to me that day when I visited. But basically, Envoy is an educational nonverbal yardstick. It's a set of nonverbal classroom management skills and strategies that educators use in order to foster student independence and maximize engagement while preserving relationships between adults and children. And I watched 4 or 5 classrooms in action, and I was impressed and specifically the music area, on how engaged students were. Now, I'm not going to be that board member or that administrator that says, by golly, this is the only program that works and every teacher needs to do this and every building needs to do this. I'm going to take a step back and just admire what went on that day and take comfort and know that it worked for them. And I was proud of, I was really proud of the work that they did. Along with that visit, you'll know that the day before we received an email, anonymous email, on all the troubles that's going on at Lewis and Clark. I won't tell you what I did with anonymous emails when I was in administration, but I read it, and I went to the building and I observed. And they had 3 situations that one situation was a child was in a room with another adult, and I would assume that it was a timeout type situation, and it was being handled. Another situation where a child went right out the door along with the para following him. Another situation that was being handled. Another situation, which was the last situation, where the child wanted the scissors that were inside the room, that they wouldn't allow the child to have the scissors. And to watch the adults, the principal, handle the student in trying to, make the student better in that, I thought they did a good job of handling that as well. And so those were 3 incidences, but the classrooms that I visited that day, 4 or 5 classrooms, there were so many more positives, if you will, than the negative. That just doesn't happen in Lewis and Clark. It happens at the school I'm at in Fairmont. It happened in Stanley, where I attended. It happens in Minot. It happened at Lewis and Clark, Berthold, Plaza, McCody. It happens all the time. And so I felt very comfortable from what the letter said, from what I visited. I don't know, it hard to put it in word, I suppose, to make a comparison, but they're doing good things there, and as a board member, I think I'm going to help RUPAC and principals give you guys resources so that you can help keep the schools safe and keep the kids learning. So, thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Brandy?
I don't have any report because I missed GAC this morning without even knowing until now. Sorry.
Christy?
Just want to report, we had a planning meeting. I was part of the negotiations strategy meeting, negotiations, and I was at the task force meeting.
Jim?
I think since our last meeting, I've been to 2 or 3 negotiation things, GAC this morning, planning, and SEEC had a board meeting. 3 big topics there, 2 of which we're going to really focus in on our summer retreat. The Valley City Teachers Center is really coming apparently under our purview, and we're going to try to figure out what that means and how we're going to staff it. We've had a request from a couple of schools down in the south part of this the area to maybe provide funds for their individual district professional development offerings, which is not something we've done for a number of years. Not sure we're going to want to go there again, but we'll see what the board does. And then this is an important one for our district. The SEEC wants more space. They would love more space in the Agassiz building. But if we can't find them more space in the Agassiz building, and I don't think it has to be absolutely contiguous to the space they have now, we're probably a year away from having to find a different location. So I'm hopeful if we have it available over there, we can get some more rent out of the SEEC.
Thank you, Jim. David?
Since our last meeting, I've been to planning. I think we've had a couple of negotiation committee meetings, and we've had negotiations, and we've got some more coming up. So I don't think we're done yet.
Jennifer?
I just want to acknowledge and say thank you to the, I think, hundreds of people that have written to us and really asked us to consider all of the students in this district, and really asked us to consider to take the time to think about innovative approaches. I don't think that we should just push those emails aside. I do think we should seriously consider many of their recommendations because they were good, thoughtful, potential solutions. And I'll go back to 7 years ago when I served on the Long Range Facility Task Force. We switched gears after the first couple of meetings. That's okay. I think it's okay, and it's okay if that's what this board says we want this task force to do, based on new information or whatever it's based on. I think we owe it to our kids, not our task force members, to do what is best for all of them. I just think what people are trying to tell us is take the time. We were recommended to do this 7 years ago, and we didn't. We should do it right this time. We have an opportunity. Let's take it. That's it.
John?
Thank you. Since our last board meeting, I completed my school visits at Jefferson and Horace Mann Roosevelt, attended planning committee, negotiations committees, negotiation sessions with the FEA. We most recently met last night. We will be meeting again, not tomorrow, but next week, Wednesday, the 22nd of May at 4:30 right here. And I've also had a Cass County Career and Technical Education Center board meeting that I sit on as a liaison. It was an absolutely packed meeting. More was shared there than I can share here. But I did want to share that there's the work on the potential career and technical ed center here, the Workforce Academy in the city has continued to move forward. They have, one of the criticisms we had back in February was that, what do we plan to put in such a facility? How would it operate? And they do have some updates on that now. I think clearly Dr. Jonas would be able to speak to it better than I would. And so I will maybe reach out to you, Christy, about the potential of her being invited to speak at a future planning committee meeting to update us on what's happening with that. They did, interestingly, share out that several members of the governance committee and the advisory council, which is a lot of administrators, had visited a facility in Oklahoma that's kind of a model for this. Very successful. It's created great opportunities for their kids. What I thought was interesting was that it's essentially its own school district. It has its own milling authority. It has its own board of directors, which answers a lot of the problems that we've had with this potential here in Fargo of where does the money come from. Nothing we can do about that, clearly, as a board of Fargo Public Education. But I did think it was interesting. What we have going on right now, I think, is very successful. We're hitting a lot of limits with what we can do with the model that we have right now, I think is clear. And Northern Cass and Central Cass would be very excited to have such an academy filling a lot of their needs. And they expressed that, and I just wanted to pass that along for our board's information here. That is the end of my liaison report. Thank you.
Robin?
Sure. We met this morning, as mentioned, for our Governmental Affairs Committee. We debriefed the session. We thought it would be helpful to talk about our 3 legislative priorities and kind of our very general overview. Our first priority was SEL, Social Emotional Learning. $1.5 million in grants was embedded into the General Fund 2265. That is a first step. However, we did note that we have growing needs of the district, as do every other school in the state and in this country. So the growing needs will be continued to be funded from our general fund and could be pulling from some funds that could be used elsewhere. So that will continue to be a legislative priority for us. Our second priority was on-time funding for, I was delightfully surprised that this is also part of 2265, the major funding bill. There is some incremental movement towards on-time funding, so that was very, very good news. I think that we need to let that sit where it is now. Third priority is underfunded programs, which includes EL students and special education. And again, back to my earlier comments, those children not only are required to give them their services, are morally obligated to give them those services. So those dollars will be pulled from other areas in our general fund, so we will continue to focus on those. Post-session thank you letters. There was a discussion on how to acknowledge the work that our legislators did, so I will be submitting a draft so Jolynn and everybody else can, and it'll come to the board for input, but we figured we would thank them for their work, acknowledge some of the growth and how they addressed our legislative priorities, and also ask for their feedback as well. We also want to acknowledge Alexis Baxley and Amy DeCock from North Dakota School Boards Association. They were instrumental in this session and very helpful to me. I learned a lot this session. So we have some good baseline set up for next session. Legislative interim activity, the committees will be assigned in the fall from the state leaders. So we're kind of on hold from a state legislative situation at this point, but that doesn't mean we have nothing to do. So as noted in our board committee policies, we are charged to track federal, state, and city legislation. So we will be putting a little bit more of our emphasis on particularly some city information. For example, I know tomorrow, Jim, one of his liaison boards, he will be meeting, with his community development meeting, and they're talking about core neighborhoods. That would be certainly something we want to pay attention to. We're not going to be taking positions most likely, but I think it's important for our board to be informed on those. So for that reason, we also did not schedule another GAC meeting. We are required to meet quarterly according to board committee policy, which would push us out, if we only met 1 quarter from now, August 13th, which would mean we'd have new committee assignments. So be looking for, probable regular monthly meetings, but we're not going to have a meeting just to have a meeting. City PTA luncheon, as a friendly reminder, is tomorrow. In fact, they're so organized, they already have next year's scheduled, even though City PTA is being absorbed into state PTA. And lastly, I think it's very important to say that I advocate for all children. I don't, everything in my life is advocating for children, and to be accused of placing priorities of adult task force members over the well-being of our children is very hurtful. And I feel it's very important for me to say that everything I do in my life is for kids. And I'm about in tears right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin. The president's report has been passed out. We have let's see, the next item on the list is Governance Committee, May 15th, PTA. Is anyone planning to go to the city PTA? Robin and, okay, a couple others, good. May 23rd, Governance at 7:30 a.m. So I'm working on building the agenda for that. So if you have any thoughts you'd like to send my way for recommendations, please feel free to do so. And I was at GAC this morning. Good conversation, I thought, and happy to talk about just some efforts that we can expand, like Robin also mentioned in terms of our efforts. Negotiations Committee been observing, and the negotiations FEA observing there, and at the Chamber Eggs and Issues meeting for that North Dakota legislative wrap-up. That was pretty interesting. So I do want to say that we obviously have opportunities in front of us to discuss long-range facility planning. So beyond the work that this task force is doing that is directly associated to boundaries, we have much in front of us. And we have usually that summer retreat, a date will need to be set for that. And we will need some topics to be included for good, thorough discussion at that retreat. And so I would just encourage everyone to start thinking about, if you haven't already, some topics. If there's anything that, you know, in regard to long-range facility planning that you're interested in us trying to gather additional information on or feel that we should be doing, it's time, I think, to start kind of putting some of that together. So the work that the task force is doing does not discount any of the other work that we need to be doing and that we can be working collaboratively with and directing administration. So is there any other business that needs to take place this evening? John?
President Knutson, I will be making a motion to enter executive session, but could we have one more 5-minute break before we do that?
Yes, we may.
Thank you.
All right.
I would second his motion.
All right. 5 minutes.
You know, could we?
President Knutson, I would move we enter executive session for the purposes
And I
of
second.
negotiation strategy.
Okay, there was a motion and a second. All right, I'm sorry for forgetting that. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. It is 9:24 PM, and we are back in our regular meeting. The next date of the regular meeting of the Board of Education is May 28th at 5:30 PM, and we're adjourned.